Welcome to Planted. My name is Ian, and I'm on a mission to help you do more with plants. In this episode, we're going to look at topsoil. What it is, what it isn't, and why you cannot buy it. In midsummer, it's very easy to get excited when you've got lots of flowers and fragrance and foliage in your garden and you consider it to be a success. The sun provides the energy, but all the goodness and nutrient comes from the soil. And if you want to grow plants in your yard with any degree of success, you must have good soil. Now, there's sand and there's clay and there's a whole bunch in between. But I want to tell you now that your success is dependent on that quality of soil. You can't buy topsoil. You'll see bags saying topsoil, and you'll see adverts for people prepared to deliver to you a dump truck load of topsoil. Now, it may have been topsoil at some point, or it may be a unique blend of ingredients, but it doesn't have the characteristics of true topsoil. The very act of handling and moving soil shatters it and makes it no longer topsoil. Good topsoil's got organic matter, porosity, beneficial bugs and bacteria and fungus, and ease with which nutrients can move through the soil. All these elements are required to make true topsoil. Now, the really important thing to remember here is that when you pick up topsoil, it's not mud and it's not dirt. It really is soil, and it's got some very special traits. You pick it up and it's light. It's not heavy and dense because it's very, very porous. And under just a little bit of pressure, it'll crack. But it doesn't shatter into small pieces. The crumb structure and the porosity reveals itself, and you can see how it retains its integrity. And above all, really good topsoil is clean to the touch. So I just want to make it very clear that topsoil does exist. But the minute you start to excavate it and move it, you remove the structure that it had, the ability for it to be porous, have oxygen, absorb water, and you stick it in a pile and you leave it there for a duration of time, and now it's no longer topsoil. It may have been topsoil once, but that is not the case now. Lots of very heavy machines are used to do this work. And the very act of them doing their job means that they're driving over it, further compacting it, further modifying the soil, which makes it very difficult for that soil to ever be considered topsoil. Add to the fact that there's lots of opportunity for flooding and contamination with concrete and posts and sand and gravel, and you end up with this generic mix. It's a bit of what was once topsoil, but isn't anymore, blended with what is subsoil, which has got no nutrients and no organic matter in it, and this backfill will then push up to the house, and that's the profile in which you're supposed to grow plants. So calling this topsoil, it's just soil that's on the top, but it doesn't have those very valuable, very important ingredients of porosity, aeration, nutrient retention, organic matter. So it can't be considered topsoil. But this is what we somehow have to breathe life into. Once the house starts to get built, you've got lots of contractors, plumbers, electricians, painters, carpenters, you name it. They all come out with their vehicles, their tools, their equipment, and their products, further compacting any area that may have plants growing it in the future. And I think it's really important for you to know that this soil is heavily compacted. The idea of sprinkling 8 or 9 inches of what some would call topsoil on top of this heavily compaction and expect plants to grow is just not realistic. Every spring I look forward to bringing out my garden bench and placing it in the sun, and I can start to plan my future activities, knowing that ever I need a break I can just stop, take a seat and watch the world go by. So once my seat is in place, I then turn my attentions to digging. Now each year I'll dig up different parts of my yard. I do not dig the whole yard every year because I don't need to. But what you see me doing here is spreading leaves that were put in the garden back in November. Now these have had a number of freeze-thaw cycles, which is a really good way to break down the cellular nature of the leaves and get them to easily release their nutrients. So I spread these out, and these get dug into different parts of the garden as and when I am ready to do it. The actual act of digging is incredibly old school. It's been around for centuries. Digging soil is no big issue for me. I do a little area at a time and then come back and do a bit more. But what we tend to do now is use a tiller, and that tiller gets in there and really churns up the soil. I will never ever use a tiller again because they destroy soil structure. The very act of what topsoil is what allows plants to thrive in good topsoil. Using a tiller shatters a soil structure and stops the ability of soil to take in water and take in oxygen. So don't till. And when you start to dig, don't start walking all over it. Just let it rest there for a few weeks. Now, I've been doing this for quite a few years, so I've got my process down and my timing. But any time you can take an opportunity to reduce soil compaction, you're improving your topsoil. Now, I placed in this location a couple of granite blocks, and you can see them being dug out here. And they were my stepping stones last year. I would deliberately put the blocks to avoid unnecessary compaction, and I'll put them back in again when I start to plant my yard, so I'm not standing on this fresh dug soil. Now, if you're blessed with good soil, this type of activity will help improve it and make it better. If you've got really bad soil, there's no substitute then to dig, and just dig a little bit at once and add organic matter and improve it. If you want to grow vegetables or flowers, I'd start with a 4-foot wide bed, maybe 15 feet long, and hand dig it. Add organic matter as you go. Don't walk on it, and that will hold all the plants you could ever want, whether it's vegetables, roses, hydrangea, and gradually do a little bit more each time. Now, the easiest way I can explain this concept about topsoil and how you can't buy it is that it has to have porosity, it has to have structure. Now, I'm going to liken it to a car. We use a car, has an engine, wheel, brakes, lights, entertainment system, seats, a power source. And all those things happen, and we can drive that car quite nicely. Now, you put that car and you put it into a car crusher and you squash the whole thing. It's still got the wheels, it's still got the tires, the brakes, the engine, but there's no space, and it won't work. It physically won't work. So in that car, you've got porosity, the area where we can sit, the back where we can put our shopping, the engine bay, all of it is working. You compress it, and it won't work. So, you can't buy topsoil, you have to make it. It's well worth doing. Happy planting.